closer, my child.
What's going on? How are you guys doing? Hope you guys are having a happy new year, even though we like to acknowledge around these parts that it's really not the new year. It's more like toward the ends of the year. What do you think about that, Vitaly, as far as when do you think the new year should be celebrated?
Sometime in the spring, as you know, the biblical patriarchs celebrated it, I believe.
Well, it would make a lot more sense to celebrate when things are starting to blossom, things are made new, instead of the very beginning of wintertime. But you know what? If you guys have not met my friend Vitaly, I'm sure lots of people in the audience do know. Vitaly, first of all, thank you for coming back and agreeing to talk about the very important subject of usury. But please tell the people who you are and what you're about and like where they can find you.
Yeah, so my name is Vitaly. Like JT, I'm a Christian that likes looking into obscure topics through a biblical lens. You can find me on my YouTube channel called Alpha Talks. I also post a lot more on Instagram consistently. But yeah.
You've been getting a lot of traction talking about this subject, about usury, because I know that, you know, you had a very large TikTok account once, and then they shadow banned the crap out of you. And, you know, I know you like to pull a lot of videos, you know, like once you kind of get into that place with the algorithms, it's very difficult to dig yourself out of that hole. And I know that it was probably have you been talking about this about 6 months or so?
Yeah, I think going on 7 since June-ish. Yeah.
Right. So as soon as you started to do that, people are really starting to say, this is important. This is something we need to talk about. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on. I mean, if you guys don't know about Vitaly and kind of the relationship I've had with him, he's really the first guy I was talking to about the little season at all. I mean, I've talked to some people, you know, offline, but he was the guy that was really the guy who really kind of got me over the edge. I was kind of like, I was on the one side of the fence and I was kind of leaning toward the little season, but Vitaly with a full-throated just push, he just pushed me right over into the other side. And I'm like, the direction of this channel is going to be very different after that podcast. And God only knew how different it was. So, I mean, I appreciate that. So Vitaly is one of my favorite YouTubers, buddies, Christian brothers, that does great research, very detailed stuff. And I really appreciate that you seem to be, you know, kind of carving out your own path, you know, like even though lots of, like Vitaly could have, if he wanted to, like really went back into the little season, if he was really just kind of just going for kind of clicks and just trying to generate, you know, like a bigger channel. But you've had like a very different type of study that just is, I find it unique. And I think that's refreshing that you do what you feel like you're called to do. Why don't you tell us about like the direction? Because I know you've done talks about parasites. You've done talks about, a lot of the soul in the belly and all that kind of stuff. And then now this usury subject. What drives you to kind of go into these certain topics?
Well, for me, like I love obscure topics, right? Especially through a biblical lens. And so when I look in the scriptures, I'm always curious, like, what is the Bible giving the most attention to that we're not really talking about, right? So I've talked about the concept of like parasites being connected to, the spiritual realm, and we've talked about the little season, and this topic currently on usury, the root of all evil, the love of money, Christ driving out the money changers. I've noticed that it is by far one of the most unique topics in the Bible. Like there's special attention that's given to the topic of economics and money in the material world and how we handle it. Like the first reason is it says in the scriptures that the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, some Bible translations render root of all evil as root of some kinds of evil.
Mm-hmm.
But the original word is all. Like Paul really meant what he said. Like, for example, that same word that he uses in the Greek, I think it's pas. That's the word for all. It's not all kinds. He uses it for other verses as well. So like when he said, all scripture is profit for doctrine, right? If you change that to all kinds, now that kind of changes things up, right? It's not all scripture is profitable. Now it's all kinds of scripture.
Right. What does that? What? Because that would be confusing. What does that mean?
Yeah, it really softens the blow. And so the correct original definition is all evil. And it's hard for people to understand how the love of money or the love of the material can be connected to the root of all evil. But again, a root is not always visible, right? It's like hidden, like the analogy, it's hidden underground. You can't necessarily see the connection right away, but it's there. And in some way, it's connected. And it's not just about money itself, like paper money. It's just about the material world. In fact, it's coveting. And there was a Catholic church father named Thomas Aquinas that kind of explained how it's possible that the love of money can be connected to the root of all evil, right? And it has to do with coveting. It has to do with the love of the material, our sinful nature, all of that stuff put together. So yes, it's the love of all money.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say is why do you think that this is? Why did you think this is being so either so much interest in this right now? Because I know, because like I said, you've had a lot of different topics, you've had a lot of great videos, and obviously, I find your stuff really interesting because I'm a researcher too, and so you're coming at something that I don't look into, so I find a lot of value in that. But obviously, not a lot of those videos have done well, or what you're talking about, not like this. Like this is like you like really kind of seized onto something that really is important. Why do you think that this subject is really resonating with people today?
I mean, I think people are realizing that the topic of economics is connected to our spiritual life as well, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's no surprise that the Western world, America, is not doing too well. There's a lot of unchecked greed, and there's a
Fraud.
lot fraud, greed, and it's affecting us physically, mentally, spiritually, right? So it's not just a money thing. Like it's bleeding into very important aspects of our like Christian life, and I think people are really resonating with this topic because they see like, oh, this is really important. This is not, topic of economics. This is not just a secular thing. Like the Bible talks about it. I mean, the one time Christ ever got physically angry is at the topic of economics, right? He accused the Pharisees of two things: turning the temple into a place of merchandise and a den of thieves, right? They were engaging in
Right.
like a form of usury. And what's interesting, and another reason why this topic is unique, is because after this event, this is what really triggered the Pharisees to arrest and crucify Jesus. So a lot of people don't really think about that or realize that, but it's this event that really triggers his crucifixion.
Well, you mess with these people's money, and I think that maybe that this subject, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'll give my answer why I think it's important. I think that after, kind of the printing of trillions of dollars after the pandemic, like we have, it's like most of us have never had as much money as we actually have, but we've never really been as broke as we have been. It's like the more money we're making, it's like it still doesn't feel like it's enough. And I think that's obviously it's a battle of the flesh versus the spirit because, you know, God says he'll take care of us. Jesus promised us that we don't have to really worry about material things because God provides for the flowers, he provides for the birds, he loves us way more than them. And so we shouldn't worry about it, but it's kind of easier said than done sometimes. It's like we know that that's the truth, but it's very difficult to not focus on like we have to make some money to operate in this world. And also it says, and there's other scriptures like when Paul's talking about like the church, like you can't be lazy. So like you can't say, oh well, I can't worry about money, so I'm going to do nothing. So I don't think that's godly either. It's more like that, God's giving you a purpose and you're supposed to be out here doing what you're supposed to do. And a lot of this requires money.
Yeah.
So the as you said, that the things that revolve around money are greed, and a lot of it's stress for just normal folks is that we need it. And then if you're stressed because you're not really making ends meet or you're barely doing it and you're just always worried what's the next shoe to drop, what's the next thing that's going to happen to the economy, then that affects you physically. And so if it affects you physically, it probably affects you spiritually as well. And I think that, yeah, I think that a lot of people are really recognizing that, the powers that be really have it's not only they don't have our best interest in mind, it's like literally they're opposing our best interests. And I think that, yeah, when you kind of go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, I mean, the international bankers come up a lot. And then so when you see that, you're like, that old expression, follow the money. And yeah, if you go back to what Paul said about the love of money being the root of all evil, that's basically what that phrase means. Follow the money. This is where you're going to find the end of this conspiracy, like who benefits from this. And then you find out who is the people who are really the world wicked elite. And this is why they're doing it, because they love material possessions. They only see in the flesh, and it robs us of a lot of things besides just material wealth.
Yeah, I mean, and another reason I find this topic really unique is, the whole thing about not being able to have two masters. So, like, Jesus is
Right.
literally saying we have no wiggle room. You either have to fully love God or fully love mammon. There is no in between. You can't be, a partial Christian in the world of business. You go all in, right, with one or the other. It just doesn't exist that you are, you want to serve mammon and serve God at the same time. So I think another reason why it resonates is people are kind of starting to realize that we've totally replaced God with mammon, and that's why the world really sucks right now in like various ways, like work culture, the products that we have, the services that we have. It feels really empty and dull. That mammon is honestly God right now, and that's why I made a post on this on Instagram. How some of the most successful people in the corporate world tend to have the dark triad of personality traits like psychopathy, Machiavellianism, narcissism. Basically, it's people who have no empathy, no sympathy for people, and they see people as a means to an end versus an end itself, right? Like as Christians, we're supposed to see everybody valuable despite what they can give us, right? Despite their productivity. But today we see ourselves and others in terms of value. We judge them by their productivity, right? That's why companies can easily lay off 10,000 people without really having any concern for them or their families, or thinking about, oh, they're going to suffer. They don't really care. So again, everything is a means to an end when mammon is God, and
Right.
psychopathy thrives.
Right. I just saw a story yesterday on my Instagram feed. It was about, what is it? Some kind of a was it some kind of cupcake business? Did you see the post about that?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, kind of one of these big old kind of brokerage companies that buy these, like they buy like Jersey Mike's, Subway, and all these kind of things, and then they just strip them apart, and they literally just eventually this to this kind of bakery became like, the owner sold it for millions, and then this kind of brokerage company bought it, pulled it apart, and then gave everyone a pink slip the day before New Year's with a 1 day notice, like that they were fired. And yeah, like you're taking people's jobs, and I mean that's kind of what you see in kind of corporate America, where it's like it's soulless. It really doesn't see any value in it. And it's kind of funny because I just watched It's a Wonderful Life. Have you seen that movie?
Is that the Holocaust one?
No, no. It's the Jimmy Stewart classic. It's the Christmas movie.
Oh, I'm thinking of the other one. There's never mind, my bad. No,
Yeah,
I,
that would be
I
an interesting title for a Holocaust movie. But no, it wasn't about that. Have you seen it?
yeah, yeah.
Of course. I mean, that's the funny part about that movie, is that's kind of what they're showing you. Is you have Potter as the materialist banker, kind of like the bankers like we deal with every day. And then you said you have the Bailey business, bond and loan, or bond and build company, or whatever they had. And it was George Bailey was trying to give loans to people so they could buy something that was decent now, instead of like waiting to save up all the money. And he was saying, doesn't everybody deserve a bath and a bed and blah 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 before he gets it, or he's supposed to just like work his whole life before he can get it? And then what he was really doing was he was building a community of people who would, take care of him when he was in a tight spot later. That's what the movie shows, is that he had lots of friends. And what the movie shows also is that if he had never been born, if he was not there to, sacrifice of himself, he's not getting rich like Potter was. He was actually doing without. He didn't get to go to college. He didn't get to send his kids to college. He's going to have to grind out. But then the community is so much better, because when he was not there, it was all bars and, basically porn theaters, and it was like literally like without people actually not thinking about money first off, thinking about other people. Like that's the place you get, and that's kind of what you're kind of getting from America now. I mean, I thought it was a really good movie because I was like, yeah, it's really interesting to think about how much impact we have on people's lives, but it's really all that's what the movie's really focused on. It's like one guy sacrificed of himself for money, and the other guy's like, well, these deadbeats can't pay these loans off. Well, of course they can't because they likely were heavily interest, tons of interest, and they were overpriced to buy crap. And that's what, like, yeah, we live in Pottersville now, but the
Yeah.
movie showed when there was no George Bailey.
Yeah. I mean, I think another reason why people resonate with this topic is they're starting to realize that our whole system, like our capitalistic economic system, is very antichrist because we used to Christianize the system that it's also, it's so free and it's the closest thing to what Christ would approve of in terms of economics. But again, this is not an endorsement of like socialism or communism. I think all those systems are honestly a false dichotomy. And I think there is an alternative to the way we're living. But yeah, people are starting to realize like, hey, this sucks. It promotes antichrist values like individualism, right? Everyone's looking out for their own butt instead of the community. It promotes usury. It promotes unchecked greed. It allows terrible personality traits like psychopathy to thrive, as we can see in the corporate world. I was reading this one article where a psychologist was saying that, we used to study psychopaths in prison, right? That's where we got our study source and materials. And she was all like, now we realize that we can actually study them in the corporate world. In fact, those psychopaths have some of the worst effects on society because when people think of psychopaths, they think of, sadistic and violent people. Most of them aren't. The worst psychopaths are in the corporate world because they are in charge of our, economic systems, our jobs, work culture, our products, and our services. And so that is the worst position to be in when psychopaths are in charge. It's like that old 80s song, The Lunatics Have Taken Over the Asylum.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that song, but it's kind of the same.
Surprisingly, no, even though I'm kind of the 80s guy.
Yeah, it's a famous 80s song, but the concept is kind of the same, right? The psychopaths and these kind of behaviors we're supposed to frown on. We're supposed to keep that in check if we're a good moral society, but we've kind of allowed this environment to where they can thrive. And it kind of makes sense, like why, somebody with psychopathy would do really well in the corporate world if, acquiring as much mammon as possible is your goal, right? That's at the top of the pyramid. It makes sense, right? If you don't care about people, you got no sympathy, no empathy, that's not going to get in the way of you getting as much profit as possible because you can easily fire 10,000 people. You can easily, turn a workplace toxic just to, promote more productivity, having no concern for the person. You're Machiavellian. You see everyone as a means to an end, right? Everyone you meet, you are just trying to get something out of them. You don't see them as inherently valuable. And you're narcissistic, right? All you care about is yourself. So if you have these traits, you always see those videos of like, people promoting courses on how to get rich. Honestly, the secret is embrace the dark triad of personality traits. If you want to get rich, right? If that's your entire goal, be a psychopath, be a piece of trash human.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. I was thinking about that movie, American Psycho, as you were talking about that. So if you guys are not familiar, it's that Christian Bale movie, and it's set in the 80s. And of course, these guys, they're like Wall Street guys. And of course, it's a satirical because like he's like a literal psychopath, but they're showing that all these guys are pretty psychopathic, like all his friends are too, because they really are only just consumed by their own materialism, and it's like they really don't care. And I'm sure that movie was probably a play off of the original movie like Wall Street, where Michael Douglas famously says greed is good. And so like that's kind of like your maybe your capitalism at this worst form, where like people just are, they literally are just, it's get rich, I don't care who I step on. And so in American Psycho, it's like literally this guy is a serial killer, because like that's where that kind of mindset goes, is like it really, these people have lost all their humanity. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's absolutely which was true. And even you think about, it was a movie that came out not too long ago, was The Wolf of Wall Street, and it's a comedy supposedly, but it's it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's playing this Christian, I forgot what his name was, Christian something. Of course, that's ironic, his name's Christian. But yeah, it's just like these guys are first of all, their morals are non-existent, and they show it in every which way. And of course, they're also just criminals. And I think that's kind of the thing when, like, you're right that you can look at different kind of economic models, and they're all flawed because I think inherently, usually the worst people rise to the top of all these models. So like the idea of communism is kind of good in theory. In practice, it's horrible because these kind of socialistic systems, it always leads to, again, a very powerful group of people who are at the top of it and they benefit greatly, and everybody else being a serf. So regardless, for like the common man, they always get screwed in all these models because inherently you have like the people who serve mammon, they serve money. And you're right, that's really interesting. I've always really been struck by that. That Jesus doesn't say you can serve both God and like another God. He's saying like literally the two options there are God and money. So I mean, if Christ himself said that, well, then I think that there's a lot to that.
Yeah, you really think about it, Mammon and God are like two completely opposing forces. That's why it doesn't make sense. Like there's a church father. He's actually one of my favorite ones called Saint John Chrysostom. He was like a bishop in Constantinople in I think the fourth or sixth century. But he basically wrote about the whole concept of God and Mammon, and he said these are two opposing forces. For example, Mammon takes not only does he not help the poor, he strips the poor of everything, even his last piece of clothing. Meanwhile, if you serve God, you sacrifice yourself to help the poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your profits, sometimes even your needs, not just your desires, right? Like there's an example of in the second century, there's an early Christian who wrote about Christian communities who didn't have much food of their own, right? But they had a desire to help the poor anyway. They were poor themselves, but they felt that it was their duty to help the poor even when they're poor. So what they ended up doing is they fasted for 3 days, and all the food that they have, they collected it and gave it to the poor, right? So they sacrificed for the cause of mercy. They stripped themselves. They were super altruistic to help the poor. Meanwhile, if you serve Mammon, not only do you not extend a helping hand to the poor, you take from them, right? You take advantage of their desperation. And again, getting into the topic of usury, which means any interest on a loan, according to the biblical definition, what do these companies do? They take advantage of people who are vulnerable, who don't have money. And so they let them borrow, but they charge them interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, as one example, as these two are just completely opposing forces, this is why there is zero wiggle room, right?
Yeah. I find it really interesting as I read through the books of the prophets and I read about when Jerusalem's about to be judged. The thing that God is most displeased about is how they treat the poor. It's that they're taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
And of course that's, so that goes right in line with what you're saying. It's like that's how you show how you love God is how you treat the least of me. So like how you treat them is how you treat me. So when this person's naked, you give them clothing. They're thirsty, you give them a drink, give them something to eat, give them shelter. And it's like that is how we're judged. And I've been really struck with that. I've done a lot more traveling over this past year. And I've been to cities like LA and Miami. And I remember thinking like this has got to be like what Babylon was like. It's got the richest of the rich living right next to the poorest of the poor. The amount of
Mm-hmm.
excess, and I just thought like that has got to be like what those Nineveh was like, where Jerusalem before God judged it a couple times, where you had the poorest of the poor right next of the people that had just the most extravagant lifestyles, and just they would just step over a homeless person just to go spend more money than somebody could make in a whole year for dinner.
Yeah. I mean, like, another reason this topic is super duper important is because it is a salvational issue. And when I say that, like, some people get a little bit surprised, right? They're like, are you saying we're working for our salvation? No, I think there's two extremes in Christianity. The first one is believing that you work for your salvation, right? Salvation is a free gift. But the second extreme is believing that a rejection of Christ or belief in Christ is purely idle. It's like a mental agreement, it's an
Right.
intellectual
Mm-hmm.
agreement. And so, can you actually pull up one of the images in the book of Matthew where Christ actually
Sure.
talks about this concept of what it means to reject him?
Okay, I got this. Should we go right from the beginning? Because I got this first one, or are we going to go back to that?
We'll go back to it. I just want to point this
Okay,
one
so
out. It's going
Matthew.
to be the first one at the top.
Okay.
I believe this. Yep, there we go. So this is the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 41 through 45. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered, or athirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did it not to me. So, like, notice what he's not saying in this verse. He's not accusing them of not believing in Christ mentally or intellectually, right? That's why they're surprised. And they're like, what do you mean we didn't feed you, serve you, right? He's talking to his generation at that time that actually did these things, that fed him and served him and ministered. He's saying, whatever you do or don't do to the poor, you do to me. So in this verse, belief and rejection is not limited to intellect, it's your actions. Even though you might believe fully in your mind, right, that no, I believe in Christ, um, it's not limited to intellectual belief. And that's kind of where I think we are able to believe in our own lives. And he's kind of calling this out. He's saying, no, whatever you did or didn't do to the poor, you don't do to me. And so I believe the topic of usury and economics is a salvational topic, is because Christ is saying, like, when you engage in these kind of practices that are in opposition to how Christ lived, right, like taking care of the poor, ministering to them, helping those who are in need, you are actually rejecting him with your actions, which is worse than rejecting him with your words.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. It's that because I'm not sure if this is the account where he says before that, he's like that these people are going to come to me and they're going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we cast out devils in your name?
Yes.
Didn't we prophesy in your name? And it's like, so like, that's probably the scariest verse in the whole Bible is that he's saying, depart from me. I never knew you. Even though they knew him kind of, or they knew who he was and they believed who he was, they're calling him Lord. And yeah, but their actions deny what his real commandments were about loving God with all your heart and showing that you love God with all your heart by loving your neighbor.
Yeah,
And of course, it's
exactly.
interesting that he shows like when the story of, the Good Samaritan. Remember, they asked, "Who's my neighbor?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Everybody. Who's not your neighbor? Everybody around you is your neighbor." Like the
Exactly.
Samaritan was their neighbor. It's like that's how you were supposed to treat everybody. Yes, that's scary.
It is, and I think the early church had a better grasp on this verse than we do. If you can go back to the slide, pull up some of John Chrysostom's words.
Okay.
A lot of his homilies were heavily directed on this verse in Matthew. Like he really put a lot of emphasis and attention to this verse because of how important it is. He would always call out greed and usury and the mistreatment of the poor and how we handle the material world. Yeah.
Is this good?
Yeah, that's one of them. So again, this is John Chrysostom. This is homily 20 on 2 Corinthians. Do you wish to see his altar? This altar is composed of the very members of Christ. This altar you can see lying everywhere, in the alleys and in the agoras, and you can sacrifice upon it any time. Invoke the Spirit not with words, but with deeds. Right. So when it comes to serving the Lord directly, not just indirectly, right, like going to church or singing songs, he's saying when you help the poor, you are directly serving Jesus Christ because everyone has the image of God in him. When you reject the poor, you are rejecting God. When you help the poor, you are helping Christ. And so I think we don't fully believe this as much as we should, I think, in America at least.
Sure.
Yeah. There's another verse or another homily, I believe. Let's see.
Like I said, I wish I had these in order.
Yeah, I should have organized it.
Okay, let me see.
It's
So okay, there's Michael, there's St. Baptist. Here's another one.
There we go. There, yeah. So this is on the book of Matthew. Remember the nakedness I endured for you on the cross. I fasted for you then, and I suffer for you now. I was thirsty when I hung on the cross, and I thirst still in the poor. In both ways, to draw you to myself, to make you humane for your own salvation. So he's basically saying the importance of helping the poor is for your own sake, right? To make you more humane, to make you more human. And I think that's one of the reasons Christ says that the greatest in the kingdom of heaven are children. Because if you ever observe the behavior of children, there's a lot of like good psychological studies on this. They are super altruistic. They don't see other babies or other humans as a means to an end. They just see them as the end itself, right? So there are experiments that they did. I remember I talked about this on another channel where they took a group of babies and they all gave them like snacks, and some babies didn't have snacks, and they were all hungry, right? And so what ended up happening, the kids without snacks were given snacks by the other babies who had snacks, even though they were hungry, right? So it was just kind of an example of showing how altruistic babies and toddlers naturally are. Like it's their nature to be this altruistic, and that's why Christ pointed out like these are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It's not about theology or how intellectual you are. It's the fact that they're willing to serve their fellow human being and that they're able to take on another human's burden, right? Like, I mean, you're a dad, you grew up with, your daughters, right? You probably saw how when you're upset or when mom's upset, the daughter takes on those emotions or the kid takes on those emotions, right? If you're happy, the kid takes on those emotions. And that's another verse in the Bible. You're supposed to carry people's burdens or take on those kinds of burdens. So that's why I believe he said children are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven for this very reason, because of the commandment to serve those in need is serving Christ himself.
Right. And that makes sense too, as well, that when you're a young child, you know that your parents are going to take care of you.
Yeah.
So like that if we believe our good Father in heaven will take care of us, well, then I can give away this because this is not a hard thing for God to provide for me to replace what I gave him. God could replace it, 100-fold what I just gave away.
Exactly.
And so like when you do believe like your father is like your earthly father who's good, who's obviously our heavenly father is much better. If you think, well, yeah, this is not a big thing for my God to replace this. So here's the shirt off my back. I'm sure God can give me another one. And I think that it's, again, these are like a lot easier said than done. But I mean, yeah, I do believe that that's probably what part of having faith like a child is just fully trusting in your father in order to basically, you have the ability to do anything you want to because your father's going to take care of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another reason why he said children are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is because they're not desensitized to other people's burdens. I mean, if you can remember back to the time when you were a child, like I'll give myself as an example. I had a very hard time as a kid watching sad scenes in movies or even cartoons.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when I would watch, let's say, like The Land Before Time, when Littlefoot's mom, died, or what's that one movie, My Girl?
Right? Oh yeah. Was that Macaulay Culkin?
Yeah, I remember that last scene. Like, oh, his glasses, he can't see without his glasses. I would be able to take on the burden of a fictional character or a cartoon. So that's how amazing children are. They can do this. They'll watch something sad, right? That's not real, that's fictional, that's a cartoon, but they end up crying or feeling like terrible about it. So what I would do as a kid, I would skip these scenes because like it made me feel really uncomfortable.
Would never watch any movie about a dog because we know that they're going to die at the end of it somehow.
Exactly, right? Like Marley and Me.
Yeah,
or like any other.
I can't do that.
Yeah, and so like the fact that children are that emotionally intelligent, like that's the peak of emotional intelligence when you're truly able to take on another person's burden. But I think like now, for example, I'm very desensitized. Like I can watch a sad movie and it will do nothing to me. I can watch a horror movie and I'll just be like, oh, this is fictional, like whatever, right? But this kind of carries into how we see the rest of the world. You walk past a homeless guy and you're pretty desensitized. You're not really, you can't put yourself in his shoes. Maybe you can intellectually do it. You can understand why he's feeling a certain way, but you can't feel what he's feeling like children can, right? When it comes to being able to take on the burdens of real people or fictional characters. And so like when we're desensitized, we don't have a sense of urgency, but imagine like you walk past somebody who's in need, right? Like a homeless guy or homeless woman who's clearly hungry and freezing, and you just like, you feel like you're there, you're them. And it just stops you in your tracks, when you feel this kind of way. And you feel an urgency to do something like, no, I can't keep walking. And then on top of that, if you truly believe that serving the poor, serving Christ, now you have extra urgency, right? So you have the urgency from taking on another person's burden, and then you have the urgency of helping someone in need from the fact that now you believe you're actually serving Christ. And I believe that's how the church in Acts got rid of poverty altogether. They were able to take on one another's burden, and they fully believed that serving the needy is serving Christ himself.
Right. And if you think about it, even my example, where I was saying that God can replace these things, but more blessed are you if he doesn't replace them. Right.
Yeah.
Because that's always like the thing where you always have to realize that, what's the verse when it's basically saying like it's better to give to somebody who can't pay you back.
Yes.
Like, so you're not expecting it back. So like you're going to get repaid in heaven if you gave it away here. So like the more you sacrifice here, the more you're storing up your treasures in heaven. And it really does take a lot of actual real faith to do that, because that means you actually believe that the promises of Christ are good, because that's how you show you do. Because like, yeah, that if you did something good for somebody, you didn't tell anyone because you didn't want any credit here, because if you get that credit here, that's your reward. So your reward is here. And so that's kind of like the antithesis is that idea of like the kind of the prosperity gospel, where it's like, here, throw your money in the plate and God's going to make it much bigger. You're going to win the lottery next week or something.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're doing it not for the right reasons then. Like, that's the whole point, is like that you are picking up your cross, you're denying yourself daily here, because we know that these things are temporal or transient, and the things that where the place we're storing them up in heaven are unseen things. And you can't, like you can't get credit here and get credit there. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole concept of when it comes to some of the greatest human innovations, there's always the argument that it's because of the profit incentive, right? That's the argument for why greed is kind of necessary.
Yeah, capitalism. That's like
capitalism.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, it gives us the best innovations, but in reality, some of the best, most impactful innovations that we have gotten was when humans believed that serving others is serving Christ themselves. So a good example is to give credit to the Catholic Church. They invented the concept of hospitals as an institution, right? So back then it was free for the poor and the needy, for everybody who needs hospitals.
Free healthcare.
Free healthcare. And today, it's a profit incentive machine, right? They turned something that was originally belonged to the church, and they turned it into the mammon worshiping mess that it is now.
Oh, it's so horrible now. Yeah, you think about the way that the American healthcare system is, where they will treat people like cancer patients up into the last day they're going to die.
It's disgusting.
It's absolutely disgusting. So I know my brother works in the hospice industry, and he would talk about that these people would be like on chemotherapy, go into hospice and die like the next day.
Crazy.
So it's like, why were you treating this person at that point? You know why they were treating them. Like, that's why they'll say you should get this surgery or you should get this kind of treatment, because they make a lot of money when they do that. And yeah, when you have witnessed it kind of in your personal life with your immediate family, and you see how horrible it is, it's like, it's easy to kind of push these problems off when it's not related to you. But when you actually see it with your own eyes and you really experience it, it's like soul crushing that this is what people are dealing with every day, because it's just the love of money. It's like, it's like everybody always talks about that. If big pharma can cure something, well, there's probably not as much profit in curing something as it is treating symptoms. And
Exactly.
That's what they do.
Like, that was my argument for the whole, the profit incentive breeds innovation, was like, no, if mammon is your God, then anything that gets in the way of mammon is going to be rejected. That includes innovation. And I was thinking about this analogy of, imagine a big shoe company that has the blueprints to make a shoe that can last 15 years. Mm-hmm. Why would they do that? Why would they innovate something that great that people would absolutely love and buy when they can just make a shoe that lasts 1 to 2 years and people keep coming back to buy more, right? So again, innovation will be rejected. And another example of a nonprofit incentive making the best innovation is Nikola Tesla. So Nikola Tesla, he was raised as an Orthodox Christian. His father was a priest. One of his best friends was a priest. And there's some debate whether he did die as an Orthodox Christian, but he did have that mindset that humans are supposed to be. He had a quote that I posted, kind of like worker bees, right? Bees labor for one another in their community. They help each other. That's how they live. And the church for the longest time respected bees as one of the greatest animals because it's a representation of how we're supposed to live here on Earth. And so, because of Nikola Tesla's altruistic mindset towards helping people, that was his incentive to make his technology like Wi-Fi and radio and all these things that supposedly is supposed to help lessen the human toil. And of course, now it's been turned into again a profit incentive machine.
Right. I can't help but think about that. We always talk about that when we talk about the old world and the idea that they might have had some kind of a potentially like free energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then so some people would say, well, why would they ever lie about that? And it's like there's billions and trillions of reasons why they would lie about that. Because yeah, that's what people see is that, it's kind of like regardless if we believe that's true or not, if there was Antiquitech, I mean, I believe that there was, but regardless of that, the system that they had, they were able to create amazing things without the same economic structure that we have. So doesn't that tell you a lot? You know what I mean? They made things that we still really are in awe of today in a time where we're told that they weren't actually all super rich.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like something's off regardless. I believe they did have some technology, but at the same time, if they were majority Christian countries that all have all this kind of architecture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, they were doing something right? They were doing something right if they weren't doing it the way we're doing it now. We know that like the fractional lending stuff has not created more wealth for people.
No.
It's gave incredible wealth to few, but it's not helped the many.
It's done worse for most.
Absolutely.
People. Yeah. I guess we can get into usury, what it is, the definition.
Yeah, let's go right from the top on
right from the beginning.
Usury. Because it's funny that you say that, and it's like a lot of people probably. I mean, I'm sure this is probably one of the more intelligent audiences on YouTube, so I'm sure everybody in the chat knows what this word means. But I'm sure a lot of people never grow up. We're never taught this word in school, are we?
Or in church, a lot of times.
Nope, neither. Okay, so here is the dictionary definition.
Okay, so usury, according to the dictionary definition, is the illegal action or practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. So we live in a debt-based economy, right? Borrowing and lending at interest is our entire economic system. Most of you who have homes, you have mortgages, right? You didn't buy your house with cash. Cars, right? Buying really important things in your life, where you all do it through debt. And so lending on interest and borrowing on interest seems very normal. It doesn't seem like it's immoral because it's part of our system, right?
It's like all we've ever known. I mean, like
exactly. And so if this is all we've ever known, then the topic of usury or the definition, we're going to see it differently, right? We're going to see this definition that I just read to you, but this is the secular definition. So when I started talking about usury, I've had a lot of Christians. In fact, the people who got the most offended and the most irritated at this topic were Christians, and specifically Christians that had jobs in these industries.
Right, like they're lenders.
Mortgage lenders and credit card companies, bankers. They would tell me, you don't know what the definition of usury is. It's the illegal action of lending money at unreasonably high interest rates. But here's the thing about that. When it comes to the secular world's morality, it's always subjective, right? What is unreasonably high? Is it 3%? Is it 10%? In Texas, it's 10%. JT, I don't know in your state, what's the cap for usury, for interest on loans?
I'm not even sure. I've never actually looked into it.
But it's different, right? And so this definition just doesn't make sense because the secular world can't even give you an objective definition. Is it 3%? Is it 2%? Does it depend on what you're borrowing for? If you're borrowing for a house, it's going to be 5% is reasonable. If you're borrowing for a car, 12% is reasonable, right? But the biblical definition has always been in both the Old Testament, the New Testament, and church history for around 1,500 years at least. It's been that usury means any interest on a loan is immoral. Even a penny, believe it or not, I know to us who, we live in this debt-based system, that sounds stupid, but that was their mindset of how immoral it was. So go to the biblical definition.
Okay.
Okay, so biblical meaning of usury is the Hebrew word neshek, and it comes from the root word nashak, which literally means to bite, like the bite of a serpent. Figuratively means to oppress and harm, specifically by charging interest on a loan, right? When a serpent bites you or a parasite, it harms you at your own expense, right? And that's what somebody lending you on interest does. Clearly, you cannot afford more than what you're borrowing, right? Because you have to borrow. And so
Right.
that is harming the person. That is the crime of charging more than what you lent. And so in the biblical usage, neshek always refers to any interest, not just excessive or unfair. So throughout the Old and New Testament, you will never see any distinction between what's fair or unfair. There is no 1% is okay, 2% is not. It's all like if you lend for charitable reasons. Either you expect the same amount back or you gift it as a gift. And Christ in the New Testament has a higher standard for us. He said, not only do we lend to our brothers and our sisters and our community, but we lend to even our own enemies. On top of that, we expect no gain and often not even what we lent. We're supposed to give it as a gift for the sake of helping somebody, right? So the New Testament standards for borrowing and lending is a lot higher. Like if somebody's clearly in need, Christ often encourages us, if we can, and even if we can't, like to lend without interest, to lend even not expecting the same amount back.
What's your thoughts on that in the Levitical law that the Israelites were allowed to lend to foreigners with weren't they allowed to lend with some interest, or no? Was that still a
No,
sin?
so what's really interesting about that, the people who promote usury the most, they use that verse as to show evidence that, oh look, God says it's okay to charge interest to people who are not ours. So these were wartime exceptions, and honestly, I should have put it up here, but there's two kinds of words for foreigner. There is ger, the ger, and there's another word, man, I'm missing it. It's the ger and then uh, the nokri. So these are two words that means foreigners, but it's different. The ger, I believe, are the nations that are not hostile that reside among the Israelites. And when
Hmm.
you read in the Old Testament, what does God say? To treat them exactly as if they're
Yeah,
your
treat them
own.
like they're native born.
Which means what? Do not charge them interest, right?
Right,
You
right,
you lend to them freely, you help them, you feed them, you clothe them. You have one law for the Israelite, one law for the foreigner that resides among you. Now the Nokri are the hostile nations. That's like the Canaanites. There's even some debate if they're even, human, Nephilim, whatever,
yeah. The
right?
Amalekites, the
The
blood
Amalekites.
blood drinkers, and all that stuff.
Yep. So when the Old Testament allowed them to charge interest on loans to these foreigners, it was kind of a non-violent judgment because interest is so destructive. So God allowed it for this time, right?
Right.
But it was really destructive. But it was like a non-violent way to punish these hostile nations to
Right.
force
Well, I
them.
mean, of course, at this point, they're taking slaves of these people too. So, I mean, like,
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
see that as something that is viable today. I also think there's a lot of nuance in Levitical laws. I mean, even like what Christ says about divorce.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly says that you just give this woman a paper and just send her out the house. He said, "Get out of here! Like we're divorced now." And then Jesus tells them that's because of your hard hearts. It's like God didn't want it that way. And like
Exactly.
I like how you always point out that there's a lot of things in the Bible that are descriptive but not prescriptive. This is
Prescriptive.
not necessarily the way that God wanted it.
No.
And I do think about like in the way that this law was a stumbling block to these people.
Yeah.
So I mean, like what is even said, like in there's a might be in Ezekiel when it says, "I give you laws that were not good."
Yeah.
So like some of these laws were not good, and it's like it revealed these people's hearts by saying, "Oh, well, I can take advantage of this person based on this law." So like it's almost like the idea that you gave them the idea to do it, so therefore they thought that they should do it. Like that's like kind of like the was it in Jurassic Park? Just because you decided you could do something, but you never considered if you actually should do that. And then yeah, of course, then these people are doing all kinds of things that are based on money to enslave people and work on the
Mm-hmm.
Sabbath and do all the other things that God said not to, because literally like they were being merchants was more important than anything God said.
Yeah. So the whole charging foreigners interest was a wartime exception. But again, in the New Testament, we have much higher standards. So when people say, oh, Christ got rid of the law and made things a lot easier for us, I'm like, no, he actually made it a lot harder for us, but it's the truth, right? He's basically saying not only do you lend without interest, but you lend freely now. And on top of that, not only do you lend freely, you are doing it to your enemies as well. All right, so these are very hard things to do for a lot of people. He's like, what? You like lend to my enemy? No way, right? So an enemy could be anyone who's in need. It could be, a person of another faith who denies the divinity of Christ. That's technically an enemy because if you're not with Christ, you're against him. That's the scripture says. But Christ gives us that high standard. He says, it doesn't matter if they're Christian or not. If they are a human in need, I command you to lend freely to your enemies and expect no gain, because sinners lend to sinners and expect to gain.
Right, exactly. That's the whole thing about like really showing you that you're one of God's, is the fact that anybody who's a pagan or spirit of Antichrist, of course they'll have mutual beneficial relationships with people. That's what everyone does.
Yep.
So what gain is that to do that? Like you're trying to show you're trying to be better than that.
Exactly.
So you can't be better than that by just being like everyone else.
You're trying to show the world, that we truly are separate, not just in words, but in action. Because, sinners lending to sinners, again, that's the whole Machiavellian thing. It's a means to an end versus the Christian way is a person is the end itself, right? I don't need anything from them to help them, right? I just help them just because they're human. That's it. So that's what makes us really different.
Right. So where do you want to go from here?
Now I do want to talk about Michael Hoffman's book, which
okay, I think I got a slide pulled up here.
So yeah, this is one of Michael Hoffman's quotes in a video that he did on YouTube. And he talks about the whole concept of usury within his book called Usury in Christendom, the sin that was and now is not. And he goes deep into this topic, the deepest I've ever seen out of any Christian that addresses the topic of usury. And in his quote in one of his videos, he said, if we are deceiving ourselves, it is because we need to deceive ourselves. It's because our livelihoods depends on interest on money, or because we believe greed is a lesser sin than lust. Christians would be flabbergasted if there was a whorehouse for them down the street. But if there's a whorehouse called a bank, they are not only not flabbergasted, they are probably working there. So again, as an example, all the Christians that got offended at me talking about usury, right? They're like, oh, you don't understand the definition. It's because they work there. Every time I go on their page or I look them up, out of curiosity, I'll actually look them up on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, this person's a banker. This person's a mortgage lender. Makes sense why they're defending. Because it causes like cognitive dissonance, right? It's like your livelihood. It's how you support your family. And so it creates this discomfort in your mind. Because here's the Bible saying one thing, right? Clearly condemning this practice. And then you have a job which engages in this sinful practice that's called an abomination in the book of Ezekiel. Which again, if you know what abomination means, it's something God truly hates.
Yeah, God hates. He detests
and is disgusted by. Right? That's a serious word. That's a word you should pay attention to. These are actions and practices that you should stay away from if God says it's an abomination. That's kind of God like highlighting it. Hey, by the way,
could there be anything worse to him than an abomination? I don't think so. I don't think there's a stronger word than that.
He's saying, I really, really hate this thing, by the way, so pay attention. And it's in the book of pull up the book of Ezekiel verse on the whole abomination thing. I highlighted in red. I should say abomination in red if I sent it. Let's see. Scroll down.
Don't see it. Thought I got all of them in here.
Let me see real quick.
You got access. You got access to screen sharing. One thing I was just thinking of when you're talking about lending money at no interest. Historically, we've seen a lot of world leaders get deposed when they ever tried to present that to their own countries.
Yeah,
I want to say the German painter. That was kind of his deadly sin. I want to say Napoleon did the same thing. What was it? Was it Gaddafi did that?
Yep.
Lots of these guys that are supposedly like the worst of the worst, for some reason, they were willing to lend money to their own people at zero interest. Like, so if the things that will pretty much get you unalived as a world leader is trying to lend money at zero interest and also try to go back on the gold standard. If you do those two things, you're probably not long for this world.
I mean, hey, if the moneylenders crucified Christ, what do you think they're going to do to you, right? If you get in the way of mammon, of their God.
Yep.
So yeah, this is the verse I was addressing where God calls usury an abomination. So this is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 18, verse 13. Hath given forth upon usury and hath taken increase. Shall he then live? He shall not live. He hath done all of these abominations. He shall surely die. His blood shall be upon them. So in Ezekiel, the death that it's talking about is not a physical death. It's talking about the judgment after. So he's saying, you engage in this practice, like he's warning of God's divine judgment, right? The charging of interest on a loan, which again, a lot of Christians don't see this as a big deal. Lust is a bigger deal than usury. Alcoholism is a bigger deal than interest on a loan. But here in the book of Ezekiel, it's clearly outlining it. It's an abomination, and there's divine judgment that comes with this abomination.
Well, it's kind of interesting when I was talking about the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
So you have this wicked banker, and if he had his way, like it leads to all these other sins because like that's the only businesses that were open in that town.
Yeah.
So it starts with this. It starts with turning people into debt slaves. And then you really suck the life out of these people. And what do? They go drown their sorrows at the bar. And then they do all kinds of other wicked things when they're probably half cocked, drunk. What do they go do? They go gamble. They go do this. They go do all kinds of things. They go to the hoe house and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's what's happening now. I mean, people are feeling so devastated by our current, economic environment that they're doing these things. I mean, you're even seeing gambling being promoted. I keep seeing commercials of Price Picks, right? These famous influencers promoting Price Picks and DraftKings and all these other gambling sites.
The relationship between pro sports and even college sports and gambling now it's really unbelievable to me because I remember when they, it's kind of like the open secret. It's like we already know that like these pro sports leagues would not last if they didn't allow gambling on them.
Yeah.
Like that's really what's propping them up, especially like the more people get into fantasy football, which is a different form of gambling because most people don't play for free. They play for money. So like the way people view sports is so much different than it used to be, where now it's like the only reason to care is if you got money on it. But then you see what happens, like these scandals in the NBA, where like literally the coaches are part of gambling on these, these different bets. Yeah. And, and this is not a new thing. This goes all the way back to the famous Chicago Black Sox scandal where they threw the World Series. So that was like in the 20s or something like that. Mm-hmm. Maybe it wasn't the 20s. It was like a long time. It was a really long time ago, almost 100 years ago. And that's the thing is like I know for so many years I was invested in watching the crappy Redskins. I mean, they were good when I was a kid, but then they were terrible for so much of my life. And, so many times you're watching the game, and of course, it's easy to be a biased sports fan and say, my team is getting screwed. This game is rigged. But you know what? You're probably right. It was probably rigged when your team won, too, though. But, like, that's the part you don't want to admit. But, yeah, like, you're watching these games, and it's very obvious that I used to watch games, and you knew some of them were not legitimate. These games, there's so many boxing matches are just totally fixed and corrupt. And so you see that, but now they're really promoting that. Mm-hmm. Even at the same time it's being exposed that like, this is the reason why these sports we're watching is WWE. It's really not real.
Yeah.
And people people are not making the correlation between the amount of sports gambling stuff and also the fact that, oh, by the way, we find out all your favorite sports are rigged.
Yeah, it's bread and circuses. People are devastated. Things are falling apart, and they're giving into these practices that are harming them, right? Because cost of living is up. And again, that's one of the damages that usury causes is it artificially inflates the price of everything. Because back in the day, the price of whatever, right, the price of a home, the price of a car was anchored to the cost of materials at that time, the cost of labor, and the average, middle class wealth, if that is your target market. And so it wasn't, but now, what is it tied to now? It's tied to what the average person can afford to take on in terms of debt. Right. It's not tied to real wealth anymore. So that's why college has shot up in price, and the interest rates are insane. I saw a video of a girl crying because she has been paying the interest rates for 2 years, and her loan has increased by like 20%, even though she was consistently paying for that. So It's insane. I mean, it caused the whole housing crisis, right? Houses are
Yeah.
not supposed to be as expensive as they are. This is not natural. It's not, even though it's normal today, right, to take on a mortgage and pay the 7% at the end of 30 years. You're paying almost double, triple for your house. We see this as normal. This is just the way of life. No, the only reason this exists is because usurious credit exists and people's willingness to take on that credit. So what does every market do? They inflate their prices. And the same thing is happening to groceries. You know, a lot of grocery stores are, I read this article, they also borrow money on interest to stock shelves. And of course, this cost is being put on the consumer on these products, right? And so, what does this do to the consumer who doesn't have the cash to buy groceries? Now they're using credit cards, payday loans. So, again, this is the damage that usury is causing. Just one of the few damages.
Yeah. It's what's really screwed up, of course, maybe I can just cry a little bit for myself,
Mhm.
is that somebody who's never really tried to go in, I've done my best to never be in debt. I mean, I've had debt from owning a house,
Yeah.
but it's like the more I've saved up money, and now I'm kind of looking at the way that the housing market is, where like I could put down a really good amount on a house, but I get no benefit out of that.
Mhm.
So I have to compete with somebody who's going to get a loan for almost 100% of what the same house is worth, and they're not going to give me a better rate if I'm going to put down half
Yeah.
or like 40%. You know what I'm like saying? Like you put down that much money, it's like so all it's really doing is causing people who've kind of tried to do things the right way. There's no benefit in the system for them. Because
No.
that's the funny thing about your credit rating. Like you think you'd have a great credit rating if you never had any debt, but actually
No.
your credit rating
Mm-mm.
is garbage if you've never taken on any debt, because it's not about the ability for you to repay a loan. It's more about like how much money they're going to make off of you.
Constantly. Yeah, exactly. That's why credit scores are honestly so ridiculous. Like we think it's some kind of virtue to have a really good credit score. And we even teach this in church. You know, we tell the young kids like, "Hey, make sure you have a good credit score." What you're really doing is you're telling them to make sure that the system sees you as a good debt slave.
Right?
You
Yeah,
know, to
absolutely.
trust to trust you with loans. Yeah.
Well, that's the funny part, is like that I didn't realize this, years ago, was like that if you actually cancel some of your credit cards, it's actually not good for your credit score.
No.
Or if you get your credit score checked too many times, it's not good for it either.
Nope.
And you're like, what is like why is that tied to anything? Because it's
Or if
like,
you pay off the full amount on a card, it goes down. I remember doing that, and I'm like, "What the hell?" I thought it would go up a
that's
little.
funny because like that's why I was always wondering why I didn't have a higher credit score. Because what I've always done is, I learned early on that, you can get some of these cash back credit cards, and I would just pay them off every month. That's what I've always
Mhm.
done. Like I've never carried a balance on them. So I don't even know what my interest rate on my credit card is, because I just pay off everything. And then I thought, well, I should have a really good credit score. If it wasn't 800, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't as good as a lot of people's. And I was like, because I didn't just pay like the minimum, like forever,
Yeah,
right?
I
That's
mean,
they don't want that. Like that's not good. And it's like, so you're not really incentivizing good behavior, incentivizing dangerous behavior at the very least.
you're also not incentivizing family making, right? So, like, a lot of people my age are being priced out of the housing industry, and because of usury and the high cost of living. But what's also interesting now, it's really sad. I've read an article that a lot of young people who are teenagers, they're not getting their licenses anymore because they're being priced out of owning a car. Because again, interest rates are inflating the price and insurance and the cost of literally everything. So they just decide not to go into that because they're priced out. So what does that do, right? When you could hardly take care of yourself, are you going to end up pursuing marriage or family making, right? Not really. And the
No, you
whole
can't
fabric,
afford. The people can't afford it because it's like,
exactly.
because it's also that they think that they should have this many things too. Like so, it's like
Yeah,
the desire for all the things, and then you're like, I can't do the things that actually are really going to give me real fulfillment in life because I'm too poor to do it.
exactly. You're priced out of starting a family, which is the fabric of society. If that starts to go down, which it is, right? The birth rates are clearly
Hmm.
going down. Society starts to fall apart. You cannot have a functioning society without good, decent birth rates. And we can't have decent birth rates because the high cost of living, cost by usury. You can't have a house, right? You need a place to live to form a family. I have some friends who are already married, but I always ask them when you're going to have a kid. You know, they want a kid, but they're saying that I just can't afford it. I live in a one bedroom apartment and I can't afford a house. I can't. So we decide to kind of push back having a kid. And that's kind of the
It's like the
story of
movie. It's like the
everybody.
movie Idiocracy,
Yeah.
right? It's like the smart people say times aren't looking too good. We can't really afford to have kids. And then the
Well, the
people who
dumb
don't
people.
think like that, they have lots of kids.
Yeah.
You
And
get a lot of
so
dumb people around.
that actually makes me want to bring up that other post by Dante from Dante's Inferno. He said something really beautiful about usury that I absolutely love.
Okay. See if I can figure out which one it is by
It's
just scan.
the it's the one of him wearing like the red hat. He has a very distinct face. Uh, go up a little bit.
Did I not get all of them in here?
Let me see. Scroll down just a little bit again. Where is he? Where is he? I did send you a couple emails. I don't know if you got them.
Okay, let me see if I can find it real quick. Keep them occupied, Vitali.
Maybe I can answer some questions. Let me pull up.
No, but what's really interesting though is that you were saying the good news, Vitali, is now they're giving everybody access to get a car because you can get a 15-year loan on one.
50-year loan on a house too.
50-year loan on a house and a 15-year loan on a car. I've never owned a car for 15 years.
Crazy.
You know what your car's worth after 15 years? Probably not much. Probably it's not really a good investment, is it?
Let's see.
No, it's absolutely criminal. I think that's the thing. I can't believe that like that's where we're going. And I think there was a documentary a while back I watched, and it was all about kind of money and lending. And man, I think a lot of people just think this stuff is too complicated, and that's why they don't look into it. And I think it's intentionally made to be complex,
Obscure, abstract. Yeah.
for people to, because they don't want you to know how bad you're getting screwed. Like what I was saying about the fractional lending. When you look into fractional lending, it's like that if you loan what the bank was it $100, or no, you deposit $100 in a bank, what they can basically they can loan another place that money off interest, get a transactional fee, and then they can loan your money like they've got what if you only got like a dollar, like what, like 25 cents worth of that $100, and they can still loan money off of it. And so that's the thing. It's like that they make money and they actually don't have any money. It's like, can you imagine if you and I were doing what they did? Where like we were loaning money, but we really never actually had any.
Straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
But I mean but I think that's kind of like maybe that's why like this was such a deadly thing. It's like it doesn't seem like such a big deal to loan somebody like a 5% interest rate, like personal loan. But you're talking about, but this begots this whole system that like literally, yeah, everything is inflated. As you said, that if we were talking about like what a car or a house should cost, it's based on what we can pay.
Yeah.
So like if you couldn't get a loan for it, so how much would a house cost? Like let us say nobody could get a loan for a house. It was really only what you could pay. Houses would cost a lot less. Like
a lot less.
Like you couldn't even imagine how cheap they would be. Like a house would cost probably, like a nice house would cost less than $100,000 now.
Yeah, I mean, this is why, for example, a Snickers bar doesn't cost $100. Who would buy that, right? Who's in the market to buy a $100 candy bar? But again, it's kind of like the whole concept of if you have credit to buy these things, now it doesn't matter whether you have that money or not, or if you're willing to spend it.
And these people also don't care if you can actually pay it back, because they don't actually lose anything when they sell you a house, when they're just collecting interest from you, and they actually can take the house back from you at any time. And that's exactly why people who try to do things the right way, I'm not going to let them foreclose on me if I put 20%, 30% down.
Yeah.
Because then I'd lose all my money. And so they don't really care about that. That's why I said it's not really a benefit for them to do that, because they would actually be better off if they can take your house later, because that's what they want.
And I could just restart that process again. And it's
right.
I sent it to you.
The funny thing is, they don't. Oh, you sent it to me on.
Yeah, I just sent it to you in the email.
Okay. Yeah, they never even had the money to loan you that money in the first place, and that's the part where you're like, it's just literally just it's all funny money. Okay, here
Yeah,
we go.
it's banks are parasites.
Yes, very much so. Okay, here you go.
Okay, so this is Dante. He's the guy who wrote Dante's Inferno. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with him. And in this quote, he says, "Usury is an act of violence against art, which is the child of nature, and hence the grandchild of God." So essentially, in his writings, Dante said that to engage in usury is to basically engage in violence against the Lord himself, because God established a certain order, right? So when he says it's violence against art, he's talking about human craft, right? Money's supposed to be a medium of exchange, right? I give you this coin, this paper money, whatever, and you give me a product or service that you create. That is how God ordained the world to work, right? But usury tries to bypass that entire system. It tries to use money, which is sterile, which is a medium of exchange, and tries to make it off of money. Um, and so it's just a ridiculous way of doing things. It completely goes against the natural order of what God has established.
You know,
So
in
that's why.
that Christian documentary I was talking about with the money, it made a really good point that I don't think a lot of people consider is that before sin came into the world, there was no need of money.
No.
Like literally, God gave you everything you could ever needed, and it there was really there was no need to work because all your needs were provided for.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was after the curse that God made working hard, right? Like to try to provide for yourself was going to be difficult. And that was probably the moment where man said, I'm not doing that for free, right? Because this
Mm-hmm.
sucks. Working sucks now. And
Exactly.
then, like, so you really think about it, like, that is when a man's life started to become monetized. Like, so what's your time worth?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and back then, like, before the fall, they had all the time in the world to do whatever. And now it's like, so now it's just the time where, like, that because trying to get produce and trying to, obviously if you have livestock, working the animals and working the fields is difficult. So then you're spending all this time because this is worth this much to you. So it's like literally because of sin that we have need of money.
Yeah.
And that's why probably that's the whole point is like that's why it is the root of all evil.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pull up that a C.S. Lewis quote that I had. He actually says something that's perfect for this conversation.
Okay.
And after the C.S. Lewis quote, we're going to pull up what Aristotle said, because it wasn't just the Christians and the Jews that were talking about the sinful nature of usury. It was even heathens. Even the secular world understood back then that there's something wrong with this process.
I sure hope I have all these.
No, it's there. It should be. I put C.S. Lewis in the bottom corner, so you should see him. Let's see.
In the email.
No, go down. It might be in the C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis. Go up a little bit.
Got William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. I should have just sent these all at once. This is my bad.
You gonna send another one?
Yeah, let me find it. It was a really good quote from C.S. Lewis.
Have you heard recently? I remember so Tucker did something in front of, I want to say it might have been at the Turning Point event, like before Charlie Kirk got whatevered. And what he was talking about was how they are devaluing families. But he was also saying that in colleges now, again, besides the fact that these people are paying absorptive amounts for tuition, it's really not worth it. They're giving kids who don't have jobs credit cards that have like a 30% interest rate on them. Have you heard about that?
It's pretty much what universities do. They're trusting them with a $100,000 loan with whatever the interest rate is.
But it's funny. But you said like when we first pulled up that quote about usury, that it was saying like that there's an illegal amount that's excessive interest, but like giving somebody a credit card with an interest rate that's that high without them even having a job is
is
about the
insane.
most corrupt thing you could possibly do.
Yeah. Like the book of Proverbs says, the borrower is slave to the lender.
Yeah, and
Lender.
I think that's the interesting part. I was like, I've often wondered if this has something to do with the idea of actually like the matrix that we actually live in is really not a computer program. It's this completely set of just the system we're in. It's just of debt slavery.
Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of like that could be kind of the allegory in it, where it's like he's showing him a battery. Like this is what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, you're only here to power this big machine that we control, and like you don't even know that you're a slave because you're like a free range slave. Like you know what I mean? Like our our pen is much bigger because we can move around, but we are still trapped in this system that is all about making each one of us debt slaves, working jobs we hate to buy stuff that we don't need.
Yeah, exactly. I think I deleted it on accident, but I have it on my Instagram. I'm gonna pull it up real quick.
Okay. If you have, we could pull up your Instagram account if you want me to go over there. If there's anything you could.
Let's see, I'm almost there. Whatever. I'm just gonna pull up his quote. C.S. Lewis. Here, I'm gonna send you an email on it
Okay. All right. Cool.
again.
Sorry, guys. This is a live show, so you know it's live. Otherwise, we would have cut this part out when we're searching
Yeah.
for pictures.
If you're familiar with the book Mere Christianity, this is where the quote comes from.
You know, I have not really read a lot of C.S. Lewis. I've watched the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe movie, but I don't think they mentioned usury one time in that.
Okay, should be sending now.
All right, we should get it any minute now. Hit refresh.
Let's see.
Got it.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, I got 3 on here. Okay, sorry.
Yes, this one. So this is C.S. Lewis on usury. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just muted
Okay,
my
cool.
mic while the
Gotcha.
dogs bark.
So C.S. Lewis on interest. There is one bit of advice given to us by the ancient heathen Greeks and by the Jews in the Old Testament and by the great Christian teachers of the Middle Ages, which the modern economic system has completely disobeyed. All these people told us not to lend money at interest, and lending money at interest, what we call investment, is the basis of our whole system. Now, it may not absolutely follow that we are wrong. Some people say that when Moses and Aristotle and the Christians agreed in forbidding interest, or usury as they called it, they could not foresee the joint stock company and their only dunking of private money lenders, and that thereof we need not bother about what they said. So even C.S. Lewis kind of said that maybe we should have listened, to all these warnings that the heathen Greeks told us, the Jews in the Old Testament, and the Christian leaders. And pull up the quote by Aristotle. I did send you that. Should be in the Google slides.
Let me get over to there.
So this is what he's referencing when he said heathen Greeks. He's talking about specifically what Aristotle said on the topic of usury. It's the one with the laser eyes.
Okay, there you go.
So, yeah, this is Aristotle on usury. The most detested form of wealth acquisition, and rightfully so, is usury, making profit from money itself rather than from its intended use. Money was created as a means of exchange, not as something to grow through interest. The very word for interest, tokos, also means offspring, as if money could give birth to more money, a notion that reflects the unnaturalness. So it also goes back to what Dante said. It's unnatural. It goes against the natural order of things. It goes against nature. Money is a sterile medium of exchange, right? It's something that we exchange, that we all agreed upon to exchange for goods and services. It's not supposed to be something that you make money from.
Right, because you provide nothing
You
when you do
provide
that.
absolutely nothing. And not only do you provide nothing, you're harming nature, because now those who borrowed from you cannot engage in creating their own things. Right now, they're forced to service the debt that they
Right.
borrowed
Well, that's
from
a
you.
funny thing you really think about, like that. It's even hard for me to even like process what that means because like this is all we've ever known.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, really, when you think about it, that if I made, yeah, a pair of shoes for you, maybe the last 15 years, like
Mhm.
I've actually worked for something, I've provided something. So then your money goes to something. So like money is going to goods and like, so goods are made and like money, the exchange of money is, money is kind of a finite asset in this
Mhm.
system, right? Where the money kind of goes back and forth. But then when you take money and you make money off of money, where is the money actually going coming from?
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's how you get inflation.
exactly.
Because if you couldn't, because that money has to come from some kind of value.
It disturbs the entire natural order of things, right? So now, again, like I said, you're artificially inflating things, and this is causing people to not have families, and this is causing this issue and that issue, and eventually, where this leads to is societal collapse. Nature just collapses, and so
Hmm.
that's the danger. One of the many millions of dangers that usury causes, and I really do want to get into how our what is it called? How our views on usury changed as Christians throughout the centuries. So,
Hmm.
for the first 1500 years of Christianity, and Michael Hoffman talks about this in his book, there was no debate. There was no conversation around what usury was. Every single Christian understood what usury was. It just means interest, right? Any interest on a loan, and it was condemned as heresy, as blasphemy, and there were a lot of punishments that were included in those who participated in the sin of usury. So you want to pull up some of those punishments? I did send you those.
Okay. What,
The consequences of go to the
okay.
Google
Oh,
Scholar.
okay. I think I got you here.
They're
See
not in any certain order. It doesn't
the
matter.
guy's
You could
kind of
just
sad looking.
uh, yeah. So here's one example of one of the punishments that the early Christians served to those who engage in the sin of usury, specifically for other Christians who chose money lending as a profession, as their livelihood. Excommunication or severe ecclesiastical discipline. A Christian who persisted in usury and did not repent. So, repent means not only do you stop the practice, but you return what you stole from people. Right. So, that's what true repentance meant back then. It's not like, how you have some OnlyFans models who just become Christian and they hang on to all their wealth? They're,
Right. Right. Yeah.
to the early church, that's not repentance. That is fake. And
Yeah,
so we're just
it's ill-gotten gains,
exactly
right? Yeah, it's
ill-gotten
like, yeah, I
gains.
feel like you're a drug. Yeah, if you're a drug dealer and then
Yeah,
you gave up that lifestyle, but you didn't get rid of your ride with the 24-inch rims and your big
exactly.
mansion.
So what they believed is you need to engage in restitution. If you can, return what you stole, or use that money for something good like charity, like help the needy with it, right? Turn an ill-gotten gain into something positive, essentially. And so, yeah, one of the punishments was excommunication, and you were often barred from communion, right? Like, imagine telling a pastor who works at a bank or who has investments in lending, like a mortgage lender, that, hey, if you continue in this industry, we're not going to allow you to participate in communion. You can't participate in church either. You're going to have to get out of here. People would be like, what the heck? That's stupid. That's just the job, right? Now, if that pastor had investments in gambling or he owned a liquor store, what's going to happen? Get this guy out of here.
Right.
You can't participate in communion. You're going against Christ's teachings. But when it comes to working for a bank or mortgage lending, there's no serious punishments today. So this is the contrast of how the early church saw it and how we see it today, right? A pastor who is a banker, not a big deal. You're not going to get excommunicated. You're not going to get barred from participating in communion. But back then it was very serious because it was a salvational issue. So go to the one of the next punishments. Back in the day, you got denied Christian burial if you died an unrepentant user. You were refused Christian burial completely, right? So now imagine, again, today, telling a pastor who has investments in banking that if you don't repent before your deathbed, we're not going to give you a Christian burial. You're not going to be buried as a Christian. You're not going to be remembered as a Christian. Um, People would lose their minds, right? They're like, no, that's stupid. That's immoral. That's not Christ-like.
I
Whatever,
mean, it's
right?
basically saying that they weren't a Christian.
Yeah, yeah. And so today, that would be like people would be appalled. They're like, what? That's stupid, right? I
I've
mean,
never been to a funeral where this person was not in heaven. Every
yeah,
time I've been to a
exactly.
funeral, and it's like, yeah, obviously lots of ones you're like, but are they? Are they actually there? Like, you know what I mean? But it's kind of like we all kind of know those kind of things, but we don't think about it. But yeah, that would be absolutely insane, kind of a standard
Yeah,
based on
they
today.
were
So like so like what time period did the church? What's the latest they kept this view?
up until the Renaissance. Yeah, up until the Renaissance. So what ended up happening is where it really started is the Catholic papacy during the Medici Pope era. They started finding little Talmudic type loopholes for usury, right?
All
So
right, so it's kind of like all the yeah, the Talmudic things. What you're saying is basically like that I can't actually make coffee on the Sabbath because that would be working. So
it's
therefore, I'm going to take this other cup of hot water and put it in this other thing,
yeah,
where you're
yeah,
like tricking God,
yeah.
basically.
So what the Medici popes did, because the Medici bankers had an influence on those popes, they basically told them, well, you can engage in these little loopholes because technically you're not charging interest. So one example is currency exchange. It's like if I gave you $15, but I want $20 in pesos back, right? So that's
Oh, right, you're
actually,
right. The money
yeah,
changers in the
the
temple.
money changers, exactly. But that's a form of usury. And God knew that, I believe God knew that people were going to try to twist his definition. That's why the original definition means anything lent at interest, anything that's more than what was lent. Call it what you want, right? Call it currency exchange. Call it a gift. I know some Islamic bankers. It's a sin to engage in usury in their country. It's called riba, and so they also have loopholes like charging fees, like set fees. Okay, I'll give you 100,000, but you just have to pay me back 100,000 plus 5,000. Like, but
Right.
that's
Oh,
not really
yeah.
it.
Well, I think that, yeah, all the banks now they have not only do they lend at interest, but there's all transactional fees you have to pay.
Yeah, so that's kind of their excuse to engage in usury without really calling it usury. But again, the Bible's definition is super broad and super clear. Anything more than what was lent, doesn't matter if it's half a penny, that's already usury. That's already a sin. So go back to one of the other punishments. I think I listed a few more.
Okay, let me get there.
And you can find all of this in Michael Hoffman's book. He posts the sources for all this stuff, so it's not, if you're interested in knowing where this information comes from. So I'm kind of just trying to
Okay.
show the contrast by how we view interest on money lent or on whatever lent.
Yeah, here's another one.
Oh yeah, loss of legal protection. So not only were there spiritual consequences to usury, in Christian nations during the medieval times there were civil penalties, right? So in some early Christian societies like England, usury carried civil penalties. In medieval England, Christian moneylenders could lose legal protection and property could be seized to restore what was taken unjustly. These laws were grounded in biblical justice principles. The goal was restitution to the poor, not profit for the state. So again, in a lot of these Christian nations back in medieval times, back during the early Christian times, they had civil penalties, and you essentially, as a Christian moneylender or as a moneylender in general, you are essentially telling the state that you are revoking your right to be under the protection of the law just by this action. So they got the property seized. They're like, oh, you want to continue in this garbage? All right, you lose. But you know what's funny? It's like, think of the contrast today. Let's say you, I don't know how much you have left on your house, JT, but let's say you fell on hard times. You're not able to make the payments anymore. You originally bought the house for 300,000. You've already paid 400,000, right? The interest plus some
Right.
principal,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But you still owe more. But you fell on hard times. You can't pay for the house anymore. What's going to happen if you can't pay the money lenders?
They're gonna take it from me and they're gonna sell it and then they're gonna pay themselves back and I'll get what's left.
Right now, contrast it with the standards of the early church. What are they saying here? It's the opposite. If you're a money lender, you engage in this, you get your property taken, right? If you don't stop being a piece of trash, like you get your stuff taken.
I can't help but think about if you guys are aware, like the little hat people, they got kicked out of 109 countries. I
Yep.
wonder how much of it had to do with this subject right here.
A whole lot. I mean, there were laws passed specifically by England that they were not allowed to engage in these practices. And you know what is funny is like on this topic, the excuse they often use is like, oh, we weren't allowed to work in, the other jobs, right? Like a farmers, they pushed us out of these jobs, but that's not true. In fact,
No.
like, no, it's not true. The laws in place encourage them to take on normal jobs, but they didn't want to. They wanted to continue with that easy money crap, and so they got kicked out because they're engaging in this evil that's illegal for a Christian. And if it's illegal for a Christian, it's illegal for everybody else. You cannot do it. Doesn't matter. So they got kicked out.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, and I think I had one more.
Let me see.
I'm not entirely sure. I think I had.
Wait, I had denial of communion.
Yep, denial of communion, loss of legal protection.
Was this a removal of church office?
Yep. So there were councils in place that made, I think the Council of Nicaea talked about it as well. You got removed from church office if a Christian held any position of authority, especially clergy, and engaged in usury. He would be required to renounce the practice or be removed from office entirely. So, like, again, contrast it with modern church today. If a modern evangelical pastor works at a bank, are they going to remove him from his position of authority?
I'm pretty sure I went to a church where the one pastor had to leave, and then the guy replaced him was a lender. He was the next pastor, and
right.
And it was not a perfect church by any means, and I wonder how much that had to do with it.
So again, like it's just a contrast of standards. There's something completely. It's an opposition, right? They were very strict with their standard, and they knew what usury meant. There was no debate in the early centuries of Christianity. So again, what ended up happening, the whole Medici Pope thing, right? They started finding loopholes. And so they sort of softened that stance, and they made excuses for it. And they said, well, we're evolving our understanding as the world is changing. But what they're really doing is they are letting the world dictate the definition of Scripture. So then what that led to is the Protestant Reformation. Now, Calvin had a heavy influence on capitalism and the total acceptance of usury altogether, right? In Calvin's writings, you can see him doing a complete 180 on this topic. In one writing, he says, you will never find a righteous man engaging in usury. And then in another, he says, I can't totally condemn this practice because it is good for the economy. And the Reformation, there's a book called The Protestant Work Ethic, the rise of that gave rise to capitalism by Max Weber, I think. He was, I think he's the guy that kind of created all the social sciences. But in his book, he basically talked about how the Protestant Reformation completely changed our whole view of work and usury, and now we're here today. So Calvin made the excuse that it's good for the economy, right? If a person wants to start a business, he can quickly get access to usurious credit and start his business, and it grows and grows and grows. But
why? Yeah, but why couldn't somebody just loan him the money without the interest?
Because it's now creating this environment where, like, oh, I can make money off of lending, and so it's kind of like, if you sprinkle a little, what is that one verse? A little leaven leavens the whole lump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're kind of sprinkling that little sin, but it's like it gives rise to leavening the entire lump. So that's the whole nature of all sin. Sin gives you short-term pleasure, long-term consequences. Right. What's the short-term pleasure of sex outside of marriage? Right. You get the pleasure from the sexual activity. Or what's the short-term pleasure of doing drugs, right? The sin of pharmakia. You feel really good in the moment, but then the long-term consequences come later,
mm-hmm.
right? Same thing with usury. What is the short-term pleasure of usury? I can buy my favorite luxury car, right? I can buy a Mercedes-Benz for $60,000.
I can buy stuff I can't afford.
I can buy stuff I can't afford. I can buy luxury. I can start a business I've always wanted to, and it's just taking too long. But now I got this credit. Now I can start it. But what are the consequences of that? Oh, what if your business fails? You have to file bankruptcy. And sometimes with bankruptcy, you can't totally get rid of your responsibility to pay back that loan. So again, there are long-term consequences to these things, and now we're experiencing it because the church started softening their stance on this sin and tweaking definitions, and now the biblical meaning of usury actually means exorbitant rates, right? It's now our whole environment's changed. And so that's why usury is not talked about. Everyone just assumes like, oh, this is just a normal way of living. It's normal to borrow on interest.
It kind of reminds me of when I was young and you'd read the Bible and everyone hated the tax collectors. And I thought, what's wrong with them? Like, why was that a bad thing? Like, Jesus is eating with tax collectors. So what? And then so my dad had to tell me, it's like, because they were thieves. Like, they were? It's like, because I thought, of course, when you're young and naive, you're thinking, like, well, everyone has to pay taxes. Of course, it's just like today. And it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
the IRS, they're thieves. They're thieves too. It's like you don't really like you see it through a different view, but it's like that's what they were showing you, like that the bankers, the religious establishment, and the tax collectors, they were all scum,
Yeah.
right? And like
So
that's why Jesus treats them a certain way, and like that's why the people thought certain things about like what did the apostles think about Matthew or Levi, right? They probably were like, "What? Not him, Lord. You can't call him. He's terrible." But I mean, like,
yeah.
of course, that's why he called them. But I mean, it's interesting, like the view of things. So yeah, what they don't even really talk about anybody who would be a banker like today. I mean, you can imagine how wicked they would have perceived those people to be.
Yeah, I mean, like it's funny because if you were in money lending, like back in the day, back during the early Christian times, your profession was considered even worse than a brothel. And the reason is because the early church and their standard on usury, I believe they're more faithful to how Christ treated this topic. Like think about it, the only thing that caused Christ to be physically angry, like to the point of flipping tables and whipping people, is the topic of usury, technically, right? It doesn't say usury in the text, but it is the practice of usury. They turn the temple into a marketplace. That's one of the accusations. And the other one is they turn the temple into a den of thieves. And every time, like in the comments, when I would bring up, Jesus driving out the money changers, everyone would say it's not about interest. Christ was just mad because they turned it into a place of business. I'm like, no, he said
No.
den of thieves, right? What's a thief and what's a den of thieves?
Yeah,
It's
they're
a hang.
stealing. They're stealing money. They were
It's
stealing money. They were
it,
yeah. They were den of robbers.
exactly. So to kind of explain what was happening in the temple was they would buy sacrificial animals, right? But in order to buy those sacrificial animals, they couldn't use the what is it called, the Roman denaro.
They couldn't use the Roman currency, so they had what the money changers did. You had to buy this temple coin.
Yep.
Like so, you could only use certain kind of money, and then they would weigh them on scales that were not balanced.
So they would charge them double, triple, whatever the
So I mean, the
rate
point is
was.
like, so it's not fair in any stretch, but yet you're saying like that. Yeah, very likely when you exchange your money, there's probably a charge on the exchange of the money. You're probably getting obviously a terrible rate of return on what you get, and then they were selling terrible animals too that you had to like that obviously it says in like the kind of the Levitical law, the law of Moses,
Mm,
that you were supposed to sacrifice the best animals. You weren't supposed to sacrifice animals that were blind or had a broken leg or something.
yeah.
So they were doing every which way to, and these are the people trying to keep people out of heaven.
So it's insult to injury because on top of all that, they were also charging exorbitant rates for the animals. So it's like
Right.
you're getting your money exchange and they're charging insane prices to make a profit, right?
Right.
So
Like, because if they were allowed to, they could use the Roman money to obviously buy animals, and they would not have needed any of the stuff inside the temple, but they wouldn't let them use any animals outside the temple.
yeah, so again, it's the money lenders today that have distorted the meaning of scripture completely, right? Nobody knows what the definition of usury is. Nobody understands the context of, why Christ drove out the money changers. They're like, oh, it was because they were doing basic business there. I'm like, no, they weren't. They were literally called a den of thieves. What's a thief? Somebody who steals something, right? So
Right.
what did they do to grant them such a name? Right? It's like people
Well,
don't
it's
think
like it's
about
kind of
these
like what you were
things.
even saying. It's funny, like even to think about. You go back to like the subject of like tithing. So like
Mm,
what tithing meant in the Old Testament was that you produce like livestock or produce or something like grain, and then so
mhm.
you went and you took a certain amount of it and then you used it at the sacrifice, and typically you ate it yourself there. So you were sacrificing this your first fruits to God for this feast, and then you were actually taking part in eating it. And then it
Exactly.
was like the
So
so then but certain people were supposed to be tied to take care of like the Levitical priests, and even they were supposed to tithe to the high priest. But it was never about like just a certain amount of money. It was like literally it was like everybody took part in this and they were just giving thanks to God. And then it's turned into something where now people say, oh, well, you need to give a tenth of your money every week to this church to promote the business of the church. It's
Yeah.
like, that's never what it was.
And it's wild because the money lenders have also taken over church. I mean, there are Christian universities offering loans on interest, which is insane. So it's
Oh,
like
and
we
online stuff too. It's like, yeah, for online school. Like, what does
yeah,
that cost them?
insane amounts of money. And so we've completely distorted the whole topic of usury. Nobody talks about it. And it's kind of genius, right? To take something that God calls an abomination, a sin, and turn it into a system where we've lived in it so long we just don't recognize the danger, like a frog in boiling water. All right, we're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is normal.
The
No, it's
Matrix.
not.
I'm telling you, man. It's like the Matrix.
Yeah,
Like the things we're saying now, yeah, are very provably true using scripture and church history, but it seems so foreign to people. What about this? What about that? Yeah, like kind of say, what if it was just a little bit of interest? But it's like it's really not giving you, it's not really telling you that definition that you get in Oxford Dictionary that it's saying it's absorbative amounts, but it doesn't say that.
no. It's like give you a good analogy on why we find this practice normal. It's kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, right? With the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
The people in
Mm-hmm.
the cave, they think this is just normal. That's reality. Those shadows they're seeing, that's all that exists, right? The fact that we live in a debt-based economy and every single thing is done through debt, we don't see the big deal. But this practice is a sin. And somebody asked me, he's saying, I understand that money lending is a sin on interest, but what about the borrower's side? Like, what is that? And I'm like, think of it like this. It's like you purposely putting yourself in harm's way. Like imagine inviting a serial killer into your house knowing that he's going to kill you. It's just stupid, whether it's a sin or not on the borrowing side. It's just dumb to put yourself in that harm's way when you know you can avoid it, right? So this is specifically to people who borrow for certain lifestyle things, right? Luxury cars. I live in Dallas. We have the highest luxury car market of renters in the
Oh,
nation.
really?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Well, I think that's ultimately the thing where, yeah, I don't really. Of course, like I said, I borrowed money to buy a house. I think everybody pretty much like you can't buy one unless you have to do that. I mean, not
cash. Yeah.
saying nobody can't, but I mean I'm saying that 99.9% of people cannot buy a house unless they borrow money. But I think that's also the thing where what's really dangerous about that whole idea of like of borrowing and becoming a debt slave yourself is that it's like the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, right? So and so next door just got a new Ferrari, and I'm looking like, well, dang, I need to get that. And look at all they're going out to dinner again, and they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, it turns out they actually have no money, but they're living like they have a lot, and then they're encouraging other people to do that and say, well, all they did was they got this loan, got this great rate on this new credit card, and they started maxing everybody's credit cards out. There's so many people that give up the perception that they are living like their best life.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, it's like literally it's a house of cards. It's like they actually don't have any money and they are just paying off like the minimums on everything. And that weight is, I honestly, it's like it really blows me away that people can do that and they can sleep at night.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of take back that borrowing is not a sin. It is kind of indirectly. It's coveting, right? Specifically,
I guess it depends. I think
depends.
so
Yeah,
many things are, well, I mean, I think everything is really about our why.
yeah,
Like, why are we doing anything that we're doing? So, yeah, borrowing could be a sin. In all cases, no, it's not. Like, why are
yeah,
you, like, would you borrow to provide from somebody else? Well, that's different. Now, we're not talking about providing by, like, getting them, yeah, like my example where they're buying them a Ferrari. Like, they need a ride. You don't need to do that
yeah,
versus why do you do that? And typically, yeah, it's about covetousness, it's about mammon, it's about flesh. It's like I need this, knowing that the belly of the wicked, the appetite of the wicked is never satisfied. You'll never
yeah.
find any kind of real joy out of just consuming things.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm like currently wrestling with now that I know the truth about usury. Is my goal is to eventually buy a house, right? That's what I'm saving for, and the reason I want to do that is so I can support a family. And in my head, this sounds like an honorable goal, even if I have to engage with usury. But at the same time, like the Bible is exceptionally, clear on this topic. And so, do I just like ignore what I know now and just, you know, do the thing I want to do, even though I believe my goals are honorable. I'm not looking for luxury. I'm not looking to keep up with the Joneses necessarily. And so basically, like, how do I say this? I believe that it does, especially now, it's going to take a lot of sacrifice if you want to, truly, truly follow the narrow path. Like, there are going to be things in life that you can't have because you're trying to follow the truth, the absolute truth to the absolute
Mm-hmm.
detail. And it does take sacrifice because the world makes it insanely hard to follow Christ perfectly, right? Because it's laid out in scripture. Here are the standards, right? Here's how we should walk our lives. And yes, it's a narrow way, and the broad way is easier, right? But yeah, this is something I'm currently like wrestling with.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like, just imagine you were saving up your money around 2020, and then you had almost enough, and then 2021 happens, and then the houses that were once $200,000, where you almost had enough, are now $400,000. I mean, that's like
Crazy.
literally a real example, like where people can look at. And so, if you didn't have money invested in a house already, you got screwed because the interest rates went from 2 something percent to now 7%. And
Yeah,
that's the thing. I've been complaining about that for, like, I don't know, the last 5 years, where I'm saying that this system is clearly corrupt, because the idea that when the interest rates went from up like 4 to 5% jump, that the houses did not go down afterwards, that math does not math.
makes zero sense.
But I mean, it's like literally it is. I mean, it's kind of like that whole idea where, the World Economic Forum said, "Hey, in 2030, you're going to own nothing and you're going
And
to be
be
happy." It's like,
happy, right?
that obviously was not something that they were saying as a hope and a prayer. That was something saying this is going to happen. And that's what you're seeing. The fruit of this is, now that I see a generation of people that it doesn't seem like they're ever going to be able to afford to buy the things that I was able to buy when I was young. I want to say my brother, I think when he bought his first condo, it was like $26,000,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. The one I bought was like around $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
But I could buy that basically making like wages out of college. I could buy a condo. You can't do that now. Like
No, no.
that's impossible to do that. And I was definitely not. I didn't have a lot of money. So like
Yeah.
that didn't take a lot of saving. And then so now they have 50-year mortgages, as we said, and 15-year car loans. If you take out a 50-year mortgage on a house, do you actually own that house?
No.
I would say that you actually don't own
That
crap.
you might as well rent. Like, there's
Well,
no
right.
point.
We say, the real downside of engaging in a 50-year mortgages versus renting. Well, I mean, for one, rent, I guess the downside is that they could raise the rent on you one day.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a 50-year mortgage, you're basically renting it for your whole life, because you're never actually going to own it. And if you need a new roof, it's not the landlord who's paying for it. It's you. If the AC breaks, who got to fix it? You got to. So you have basically almost none of the benefits of actually owning anything. You have just like the bad side of the home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, and today, like, people's obsession with money is also making the products and services so much worse. Like, the new builds today, they're not built to last 30 years
Oh
often.
gosh, these things are pieces of crap. I mean, they have the materials they make. It's like that's the misnomer. If you don't know, like, people think, oh well, a new house is better than an old house. Not
No,
necessarily,
0%.
because if you think everything, I mean, that's what it's funny. Like that, we often talk about architecture, but if you go to the old world materials versus the stuff they use now, go look up what a piece of plywood, or like or not plywood. That's a bad example. Like a 2x4, what it looked like in the early 1900s versus what it looked like in the 60s versus what it looks like today. It's not, well, for one, it was actually 2 inches by 4 inches, and it's changed. It's gone down in size. Like everything that they make is cheaper, and it's a scam. Everything is now.
Everything. Yeah, I mean, same for cars too. The cars that they're building aren't built to last 15 years, right? If you
No,
with
those
that
things were
15 years
tanks back in the
mortgages.
day. Like those cars were like made out of real metal.
Yeah, today your car won't last that long, especially EV cars. And so that's the whole thing about the profit incentive. The profit incentive does not necessarily breed innovation; it breeds low quality products for the highest cost. That's what it really breeds. So,
Yeah. Well, anyways, you got anything else you want to hit on? I think we.
I just kind of from all we talked about, I did want to say so I got a DM from somebody a couple months ago who actually did something about their conviction on this topic. So they got convicted on the topic of usury, and they were a mortgage lender, and they left their job, and they also owned $1 million house. They told me that they sold that $1 million house and got something smaller to get rid of their debt altogether because they really got convicted on the topic of usury. So again,
Praise
it's like,
God.
praise God, right? It's like that verse about I could do all things through Christ. That verse is not about personal goals, but about following God's commandments, difficult obedience in an environment that makes following God incredibly difficult, like our debt-based system. And so there is ways, I think people should pray on this, really think about this. Minimize your lifestyles. Less is more, right? Get rid of the bills you really don't need. Live more simply, eat simply, dress simply. Really pursue simplicity. If you want to not, if you want to get rid of debt as much as you possibly can in this world, it's possible.
You know, what's interesting is that I was thinking of a couple verses about that stuff. I just thought, when the story of the rich young ruler is a really interesting story, and he says, what does he say? So this is from Matthew 19 and 22. Isn't there a parallel account of the rich young ruler? I want to say that there's a slightly different version of it because I think that it might actually be in Luke.
I believe so.
Yeah, the one in Luke is a little different because it's almost like Jesus is implying that he's rich, but he kind of got rich by maybe screwing people over. And that's
that
why.
part, yeah, that part I don't know. I just know that the rich young ruler was like sad when he was told to give up his.
Yes, let me see if I can find that because I know I saw the Matthew version, but I remember reading that the Luke account was a little bit different,
Mhm.
and it hits a little harder when you think about like what he's actually saying. Okay, so I'll just read it. I'm not sure if that's any different, but I think it is. Okay, so this is Jesus counsels the rich young ruler, and this is Luke 18, starting with verse 18. Now, a certain ruler asked him, saying, "Good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" So Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother." And he said, "All these things I've kept from my youth." So when Jesus heard these things, he said, "You still lack one thing. Sell all that you have and distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Come follow me." But when he heard this, he became very sorrowful because he was very rich. And when Jesus saw him become sorrowful, he said, "How hard is it for those that have riches to enter the kingdom of God? For it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." And those who heard it said, "Who then can be saved?" But he said, "All things are impossible with men. Or the things that which are impossible with men are possible with God." Then Peter said, "See, we have left all and followed you." And he said to them, "Assuredly, I say to you, there is no one who has left house or parents or brothers or wife or children who forsake the kingdom of God, for the sake of the kingdom of God, who shall not receive many times more in the present time and the age to come for eternal life." I don't know. I guess for some reason I thought there was something about he threw in there. I don't know. There maybe I'm trying to figure out. I think there is one kind of where he kind of implies like that he might have got his gains ill-begottenly.
Mhm.
But I think overall the story resonates regardless of how it's told. Is that it makes sense to us that it would be harder to give up the things you have to follow Jesus if you have more things.
Yeah.
It's like that, it's kind of implied that, maybe outside of like Matthew, who was a tax collector, he probably didn't have, like most of them probably didn't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
So it's like, leave all this behind and go follow me. Well, like Nicodemus was given that deal and he didn't take it then either, right? Perhaps because he was a Pharisee and he was probably living pretty good. And so it
Yeah.
was way harder for somebody to give up all those things. So it's like having the things is not necessarily evil. But you have to give up more of this world if you have more earthly riches. And I think that's the other part about it. It's like that when the goal is money, you will do all kinds of evil things to get money. But if money is a byproduct of success, well, then I don't think that's necessarily evil. Like success, be, you know, be, you know, begots fame, it begots money. But if your goal is fame or money, well, then you might do a lot of sleazy things to get it.
Yeah.
When that's just, again, it's just the byproduct of actually achieving things. And that's why those people can give these things up, because yeah, obviously there's many examples of people in the Old Testament who are rich, but it was like that wasn't what drove them to be who they were. You know, like it doesn't, like Abraham was not seeking riches; he became rich. Like he was blessed by God, and I think that God can bless people who are faithful to Him. And then, but I think that I always explain it like that. I think that like as a good father that God is that if you give a kid who can't handle money too much, then it could be bad for him. It's kind of like the story of like the prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to go do terrible things with it. But then one day he wants to give him everything he's got. And it was, as soon as he's ready, he'd be happy to do that. And when you're ready, it's because this, you like, you know that this is not what you're seeking. You know, like as soon as like you can give your kid something that they appreciate, but they know that they care more about your relationship with them, now you get it. Like not spoiling them. And I don't know. I think that's kind of important. I think that's part of like why money is a real trap. And I do think that like overall what we're talking about is about like that when your goal is not money, then like you really kind of put your trust and faith in God. Like so that's why like God probably does love the poor people more, because it's like that they really have learned to be dependent on him.
Yeah,
Right.
and
And we are God's hand and feet. So we need to help those people. And I
exactly.
think that us being willing to give things away, and it's kind of like the idea of like if lending was what it was supposed to be, it'd be like, okay, Vital, you need some money to help you out. Well, I'm going to give you some money. Well, if you can pay me back, it's fine. If you can't, well, then I know as a Christian, I'm like, well, I did my best for this guy. And if he doesn't pay me back, well, then I'm rewarded in heaven. You know,
Exactly.
so
So
like if you, but you have to believe that. It's really difficult to probably really wrestle with that without, you know, the fact that everything is so expensive. And I think that goes to your point about
mhm.
usury, that what would things cost if there was no ability to make
Borrow.
transactions on interest and high interest fees? Everything would be really cheap and we wouldn't need as much money.
Yeah, I mean, here's an interesting there's an interesting quote from John Chrysostom where he talks about how when you lend money to those in need, right, and you lend it freely and you don't expect anything back, it's actually God who takes on your debt, right? God is the one who takes on your debt and he rewards you tenfolds more in the afterlife. And so debt is not, I mean, lending is not only a charitable act, it is also God that takes on that debt for you and he repays you back. He does repay you back in things that are greater than whatever this world has to offer. And so that's another thing about, ill-gotten gains versus gains gotten. The fair way, we still do have a responsibility as Christians. Wealth is more so, if we're entrusted with a decent amount of wealth, I think it's more so about stewardship at that point, even if it's not ill-gotten gains, because I do feel like a lot of people might have that mindset. Well, I earned my money the fair way. You know what I mean? I earned my riches doing fair business practices. I never screwed anybody over. I sold good products, good services, but I do think we should have that responsibility of stewardship still, because some people might have that assumption, like, well, I earned this money, I didn't commit sin getting this money, but there is still a sense of like responsibility to handle that good money that you do have properly in terms of what Christ said about lending freely to others, to
Right.
those in
You're
need.
for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think that, yeah, you're supposed to be a good steward.
Yeah.
So like if God's given, he's blessed you, it doesn't mean so you can just throw that blessing away. It's like maybe again, as we're God's hands and feet, like if you're smart with your money, meaning like that you're not living above your lifestyle, maybe you're living below your means, well then maybe one day you'll have the opportunity to take care of somebody. I remember really feeling like that because again, I said I didn't have, before I really woke up spiritually, I never really was in debt, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like living like right at the line. Like I mean, I would like try to pay off all my money every month, and I didn't want to go into the red, but I was only just basically had enough money just to support the lifestyle we were living. And that was really stressful to me. And I really always did feel like convicted, even when I'd go to church, even because I guess I didn't understand the tithing thing. I felt really bad that I was not tithing because I didn't have any extra money, you know,
Mhm.
and I thought, well, if somebody ever needed anything, I couldn't really help them because I'm just keeping my head right above water, you know, and I'm not going into debt to help somebody. You know, maybe I should have been willing to, but I guess the point is like that I was maxed out on the lifestyle I was living, and I felt like I don't like living like that.
Yeah,
I
no,
want the ability to help somebody if I can.
yeah, there's an interesting point about that. I made a video because what's his name? Not Gordon Ramsay. Dave Ramsey,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So Dave Ramsey said like, if you want to serve Christ as a Christian, you need to make some money first. You know, you need to make a decent amount of money because
Right.
you can't do
Seek
it when you're
first the
broke.
kingdom of mammon.
Exactly. That's what he basically said in his video. He said, you can't do it when you're freaking broke, right? And I'm like, this is kind of a spit in the face of the poor Christians that did do it when they were broke. Like the
Yeah,
woman
what
at
it
the
didn't
well,
Jesus said that the woman who gave like just
2 cents.
two little pennies or something like that gave more than all the rich people?
She gave out of her poverty, right? So there's even more, church father quotes about this again, going back to St. John Chrysostom. He said that even the desire to help is a form of giving because back in the day, he said all Christians felt that it was their duty to help one another because if when you help the needy, you are serving Christ. So even the poor, the broke, did not give themselves an excuse not to help. So what ended up happening if one person can provide a cup of water, another person has an extra coat, another person has shoes, another person has a little bit of food, and when they all come together, they alleviate the suffering of one person. So that's why there are statistics on the fact that poor people are more generous than the wealthy, right? And
Right.
so,
What makes sense too, as I said earlier, that
mhm,
man's time became monetized after the fall. So
yep,
just so if you do something and you don't get any money for it, that's also giving.
yeah,
Like volunteering and doing something so you don't have to have a lot of money to just go give of yourself because that's where most people probably are. And it's like I can't say that I haven't been in this place where like I don't have time. It's like actually I don't want to make time
mhm,
because I felt like I've spent all my time doing things that are going to provide for me and now I want to do nothing. But I could actually volunteer and I could do something, and that's what you'd almost rather just write a check than actually go do something
yeah,
physically
yeah.
and
I
spend
mean,
your time someplace you don't want to be.
people overcomplicate serving others. Like, oh, I want to serve Christ because he said to serve others. And then the first thought they have in their mind is money. And they're like, well, I don't really have money. So I guess I can sit on the sidelines, right? But it's like, just think of it like this even giving somebody a cold bottle of water, you're giving Christ a cold bottle of water.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. You don't need to go on a mission trip, right? You don't need to misuse church funds and go on a mission trip when there are people in your own community who might need something, right? And it doesn't have to be money. Even if you don't have anything, it could be anything. Right? It could be even your company. It's like you giving company to Christ. Like so, if you switch that the mindset on how you view these things, I think more will be done to alleviate the suffering of other people, even when you yourself are broke. I think you can make a huge difference when you start thinking like that versus I'm not wealthy, so I'm going to sit on the sidelines. Instead, think of it like this: I am helping Christ. I just gave Christ a cold bottle of water. I just gave
Mm-hmm.
Christ. I have 3 pairs of shoes I don't wear anymore. I just gave Christ a pair of shoes. He needed it. Imagine think of it like that. Thinking of it like that.
Yeah, I think another one, and maybe we'll close it out here. My one of my favorite parables from Jesus is when he talks about the guy who had all the grain, and he had these barns full of grain, and then but he thought I'll tear down these barns and I'll build bigger ones and store up the grains, and it's kind of like wipes his hands off. Look, now don't have to worry about that grain problem. I've got that settled. Now I can kind of go do all the things I want to do. And then God says, "You fool." Today your soul's required of you. So he's like, you stored up all these riches here, but you've got zero riches where it counts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's all about like seeking first the kingdom of God. It's like that. So this other person is poor financially here because they are giving of themselves and they're doing things for free that they could be paid for, but they're
Yeah.
doing everything for free. And so that person, when their soul's required of them, well, it'll be enter into the glory of your master here. Now you have all the things that all the things that obviously are way better than the things that you could ever have here. And I think that
100%.
that's kind of, I have to remind myself of this a lot. And
Same.
actually, I do kind of think about that. I get convicted about that of like maybe I should volunteer my time places for free. And like I joked because I was saying that some people are talking about how pagan Christmas is, and I said, well, what are you doing on Christmas when you're not celebrating it? Are you volunteering at a soup kitchen? Like because it's easy to say I'm not taking part in something bad that you think is bad, but are you actually doing anything good? And I think that's sometimes how we have to look at it. Where I say that, and I say, maybe I should go volunteer at a soup kitchen. Maybe I should do something like that because
I mean,
you
yeah,
always feel like that. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of like it's such as faith is like regardless of what you're doing, I don't think you ever really should feel totally satisfied that you are doing enough. Because I
no,
don't think
no.
that's like God is trying to bring you from glory to glory, right? He's trying to sanctify you. So like it's like the closer you get to Jesus, the more you realize I'm really not all that great. Like I could be a lot better than I am.
Yeah, and I mean that's the mindset we should have. It's like what you and I do. It's great that we talk about these topics and we bring these things up to light and we know theology very well. But that's another quote John Chrysostom had. He said, "There's nothing. The greatest thing you can do in your life is not fasting. It's not theology. It's serving another human being. If you've never done that, you've never done anything great. If you've never served another person in need, you have done nothing great in your life. Doesn't matter what you invented, what you created, how good your theology was. Like that is the one proof that you are imitating Christ is helping the needy, serving those who are in need. That's the greatest thing you can do. That's why, again, going back to children are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Are they theologians? Can they talk intellectually about these topics? You know what I mean? Like, are they inventors? No, but what do they do that really sets them apart from most other people? They serve each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
If a group of children, if a group of babies are happy, right? They've done these experiences, and one child is crying. What's going to happen to the rest of the group? They're all going to feel terrible, and they're going to try to alleviate the pain of
Mm-hmm.
the one that's crying. So that's kind of how we're supposed to live, right? We're supposed to see somebody who's miserable and take on their misery, really feel it, and then do something about it. So it's two things: believing that when you serve the needy, you're serving Christ, and the second is putting in the effort and work to not let yourself be desensitized. That's something I'm working on right now. Like I'm very desensitized. Like I can understand, like when I, encounter someone who's in need and who's needy, intellectually I can understand, how they're feeling, but like emotionally, spiritually, I can't. Not yet, at least. And that
No,
takes work.
that's good. Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think that's maybe when you can think about how God can use all these things together for our good. Is you think there are some tough times right now, and there's
Yeah,
probably tougher times coming up, which does give us more opportunity to actually serve Him and to be God's hands and feet.
yeah,
Because if it's a real prosperous time, then you don't probably feel like there's as much need, but there's plenty of it everywhere. So yeah, I would encourage people, yeah, to definitely look into this. And if you guys are feeling convicted about this, obviously go to the Lord with it. But I think that for us, it just I don't know. For me, I like things to make sense, and this topic really has made a lot of sense. Like, and to really see like why things are the way that they are, and it starts with us.
yeah,
Like I know that we can't necessarily change everything, but I think that if we changed our behavior a little bit, and like you just said, if let's just say you didn't borrow money you didn't need to borrow, well, you're not actually helping the system because that's the one thing. It's like that. It's that you can do something like borrowing money and it's not really bad, but you're benefiting an evil system when you take part in it.
yeah.
So I would
I
just
mean,
say like that if you can the much as we can free ourselves from this system, the better off that the whole world would be because this system does need to come crashing down.
yeah, and that's another thing I want to mention before we do end this off is people right now are going into debt for like groceries and stuff, and they're taking on payday loans. Really, kind of, especially if you go to church, figure out what's going on in everyone's life. And if people are borrowing from these lenders, don't let them. If you can offer them some help, do it to get them again to like as you said to help fight this kind of system is to do what Christ said, right? Be more in tune with what's going on in your community. Take on people's burdens. Put in the work to actually understand what's going on, because I feel like even today, with a lot of people go to church, they hardly know their neighbor's name.
No,
They don't.
these churches are very like a lot of the bigger the church is, the more soulless it is. Where it
Individualistic.
well, it's just like that you go in there, you don't know anybody.
Mhm.
Like that's not what church is supposed. That's not what a church body is supposed to be. You're supposed to
Yeah,
know your neighbor. You're supposed to know them well, not just on Sundays. You're supposed to know these people, and
yeah.
you're supposed to care about them.
That's how America used to be, even outside of church. You knew your neighbor 5 blocks away. Like, oh, that's John over there. Oh, his mother's dying. I need to go see what's going on over
Yeah,
there.
see if they need some food or something.
Yeah, but today everyone's just isolated, individualistic. And if you're going through a tough time, you're focused on yourself. And that's kind of like something I've been convicted of too, just kind of complaining about my situation versus why don't you help somebody, alleviate somebody else's suffering, instead of everyone being concerned for their own butts. Like, even though a lot of people are suffering today, I think we should still, what's the word, value or worry about the community,
Yeah.
not be individualistic. That's basically what I'm saying, even though you might be suffering.
Well, I would say that I've brought up this example. It's like I know when I've had personal struggles in my life, I felt better about everything when I was actually thinking about somebody else's problems.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It gives you like because when you worry about your own problems so much, they get bigger. And
Yeah,
then when you're thinking about other people, it's like you forgot, at least even for a moment, you forgot about their own stress in your own life.
exactly.
And I feel like that's kind of like the whole idea of like putting your hands to the plow and not looking back.
Mhm.
Because when you're going forward, it's like it's kind of like when you're on like thin ice, like at some point you just have to keep going forward. Don't stop.
Mhm.
Go forward, and then maybe you can get through it. But yeah, that's great, Vitaly. I really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for
You got
having me on.
anything else you want to tell?
That's
Well,
it.
first of all, just tell people where they can find you, and if they want to learn more about this, maybe give them an idea.
Yeah, you can find me on Alpha Talks on both Instagram and YouTube. I also have a second channel that I'm actually currently working on a few videos. And the second channel, it's just going to be casual conversations about these kind of topics specifically. We're going to talk about usury, economics. We're also going to talk about holy leisure. That's a topic I've recently been discussing on Instagram. Kind of got away from usury. I felt like I said everything that needs to be said. And now we're moving on to leisure in our work culture. And
Or
how
were you
we
talking
handle
about like
leisure.
I know you shared the meme where like these people are working, you know, we're worked to the bone in America now, and that's promoted as a great thing.
Very
And then
true. Yeah.
we're told about the serfs and how awful they had it, but then you find out they worked way less than us.
Yeah, and the quality of life was better, and things were actually not gloom and doom as the
They didn't
movies
eat
portrayed it.
poison and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah, so yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, anyways, again, I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, you're welcome back anytime you want to talk about anything because Vitaly's a wealth of knowledge, and maybe we need to collaborate again for some kind of an old world thing or something like that. I'd like to
Well,
maybe
yeah, on this topic, I didn't want to say I feel like it is connected to the little season. That whenever that transition happened, it was sometime during the Renaissance and the Reformation, and our whole economic system, I believe, is a result of the little season thing. So maybe we need to dig into that a little bit more.
No, I actually 100% agree. I would just say the timing of it all, where yeah, this was always looked down as like the worst of the worst,
And then it
and then
changed like that.
and now it's like everyone is deceived because like the things you're saying are biblically accurate, and obviously it's backed up by the historical church, and then people are like, what you're saying is crazy. It's like no, everybody else is crazy.
Yeah.
But we just
We're-
don't see it. It's like, yeah, this is definitely one of the most massive deceptions and probably the most evil things the devil has done is to trick people to think creating debt slavery is normal.
Yeah, it's part of the little season dark ages, I think. Big part of it.
100%. Well, that's a great idea. We'll definitely have to do that. But anyways, guys, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us today, spending any time with us. Anyways, we appreciate you guys.